All right. Welcome, everyone. This is a session about the resume. This is I think one of the core sessions that you should have under your belt before you get back to campus and recruitment season kicks off. I want to start by just asking all of you to introduce yourself if you are undergrad, MBA, lateral hire, whatever your background is. You are going to spend more time on your resume then probably anyone will look at it. Most of the resume is reviewed within 10 seconds. And, a lot of times the resume isn't even opened until a more informal decision has been made about your candidacy. So the resume gets scanned in detail towards the end of the process. But in the beginning, a lot of times the resume is just kind of a formality to be included and very quickly scanned. What they're looking for on there and what you want to get out of your resume a lot of times is conversation starters. And I have some really killer examples of, things that people have put on their resume or not put on their resume and kind of where that's led them. So I'll embed a lot of that into the conversation today. But the thing that I want you all as well to be aware of is that I think that I would say that the core statement, if there's one thing that you take away about your investment banking resume tonight, is that it should not be a fully complete and comprehensive view of your career. There are so many things that are really just not relevant to investment banking, and there are so many details that you could include in this document, which you'll need to control yourself and take out so that the highlights can stay. This is a persuasive document. It's a hook. It's an attention getter. It's a conversation starter. It is not a complete rundown of everything that you've ever done and all of the details about it. So those are the things that I want you to keep in mind kind of as we go through this, script for this. But the way that it'll structure this is that we'll kind of go from sort of big picture into little picture. So we'll go from kind of the overall resume and the sections of the resume into the bullet points of a resume into the words that you actually choose so that each thing does the job of driving in conversation and framing the experiences that you've had in the right light, in a good light. So I'm going to also introduce myself. I am Michael. I am the founder of Offer Goblin. It is the flashcard tool for investment banking. If you're getting into investment banking, go check that out. It's free to use. You'll get to drill technicals and see behavioral questions from all the investment banks. I'm also one of the top experts and customer favorites on Leland. I have a resume package that you can sign up for. That's $100. It's asynchronous, which means you just send in your resume and I will churn it back to you with questions. We'll do basically 2 turns on it and get it into pretty good shape. That has been really popular. I think that's done a lot for people. I haven't done any asynchronous stuff before, so that's been kind of interesting. It covers resume and some other networking details. So you can see those under my profile. You can also reach out to me. Yeah. And also, just a note, I moved and you can tell I'm in this empty apartment. I will eventually have some artwork. If you have suggestions of artists that you think are interesting that I should put up on my wall or other things, I guess stock tickers or whatever, but let me know. So right now, you can see I just have the one lava lamp on a set of boxes there. So, all right. So here's the plan, right? The format for a resume is solved. The format and the resume style is a suit, and by that I mean suits are pretty boring. They're pretty standard. But everyone in banking wears them and people look good in them. You do not want your style, your spacing, your format, your text, anything about the visual of your resume to stand out for any reason. It should be that they can scan through all of these and it's like a standard sort of data packet. And, they have expectations of what the different sections are and what is in them. And that lets them very quickly cruise through these. So if you're thinking that you're going to cheat the margins a little bit, or you're going to, play around with the spacing between bullets, or you're going to add your picture or all these other things, just refrain yourself. Keep it simple. Okay. It's going to be 1 page and it's going to be pretty much, we're going to cover for this talk 4 levels of that. So we're going to cover the overall, we're going to cover the sections, the bullets, and then into the words. So I want to also throw in here up at the top here that your resume gets attached to basically any correspondence that you have. So if you send a cold email, you should attach your resume. If you send a thank you note, a follow up, you should send a resume. If you set a calendar invite, you should attach a resume to that calendar invite. So the resume kind of follows you everywhere you go. And it's in that sense, it's a really important thing to get right because it has such a large spread. It's spread amongst so many people. Like I said, it's typically not going to be very deeply reviewed until, certain decisions are made. So in the very beginning, it's kind of just, okay, you have a standard looking resume, you have a few experiences, whatever, but the scrutiny will come later on, and it will come for sure. So this is part 1 of 6 of a live stream series that I'm doing on Leland for the next 3 weeks. It is to get everyone coffee chat ready because I've talked to a lot of candidates just as my role in running Offer Goblin and our social media pages, Instagram, TikTok. I talked to a lot of people, and these are all of these series are the things that I sense people don't understand as well, and that I've had to teach people kind of over and over. So you can register for all of these all at once. If you go onto my Leland page, you can just register for all of these events. And even if you don't, think you want to attend, it's kind of a good idea to do that just so that it's, in your calendar. And it helps us as well boost visibility of these events. Okay, so I'm going to throw this out there again that I hope that people can message the chat with something. It would be interesting to see strong bullet points or bullet points from people's resume if you're kind of curious, but any kind of message just is like a sign of life. All right, so let's jump into this. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the page itself. So think about your resume like a suit. You're not trying to be interesting. What you're trying to do is be standard, and you want no one to notice what you're wearing. It's the same as lighting in a movie. You don't want the lighting to be sort of obvious. You want it to seem natural. And this is the part that I think a lot of people miss, is that when you break formatting rules, it doesn't read as you're being creative. It actually reads as like you're not following the rules, like you don't understand the rules. Investment banking is one of the most highly regulated industries. And so those indications that you can't follow rules like that are just a bad start to your career, a bad start to your image that you're trying to present to the banks. So it's going to be one page, right? And you're going to cut older rules. So there's a little bit of judgment involved here, because sometimes if you don't have a lot of roles, you have to keep the older roles. But generally what you want to do is kind of keep the roles current and relevant. That said, there's still degrees of relevance of roles that you would keep on an investment banking resume. I like to split them up as tier 1 and tier 2, and then maybe there's sort of a tier 3 or beyond. Tier 1 experiences are going to be things that are directly related to finance in some way and are also fairly recent. So your last 2 or 3 internships, especially if they're related to finance, those would be the ones that you want to give more bullet points to than, let's say, tier 2 or tier 3. Tier 2 internships are going to be things that are maybe sort of still good professional experience, but not directly related to finance. Or it could be stuff that's just older that, is just something you did in high school, for example. You run into that a lot. That doesn't mean don't include those. If you need to fill up the experience section. And so if you don't have other things, that's a good thing to include. I would put tier 3 as lifeguarding or working in, retail or some other thing that you did in high school. I was a lifeguard. I was a wilderness guide in college. But I didn't really put that on many of my resumes, just so you know. So the way that you want to then use that tier system is that tier 1, you should put 4 to 5 bullet points for those. And across the tier 1, so let's say you have 2 tier 1 experiences, you should have the same number of bullet points. So let's say they both have 5. And then for your tier 2 experiences, let's say you have 2 or 3 of those, you would put 3 to 4. And that number, I give that range because it's going to vary based on how much kind of spacing that you have. But the core thing is to recognize that you want to kind of emphasize and spend more time on the things that are actually relevant to getting a career in investment banking. And so that's also why when we look at the sections, the experience section should be the longest. Some people, again, don't have that much experience. So I'm getting kind of sidetracked here. Let me give you the full format of an investment banking interview. This is the full format for an investment banking resume. So at the top, you have the education section. Keeping it very simple, you're going to keep your GPA there. I personally don't like including coursework because I think that it's a little bit generic unless you've taken really advanced courses for your age. But what's good to include there are things like honors, clubs that you're involved with, those sorts of details. Below that is the experience section. And like I said, in the experience section, you're going to have tier one, tier two experiences that are going to tie as well as possible to investment banking. Below that, you have the additional section. The additional section is kind of fun because you can put a lot of different things into there. One of the best things to include in there is an interests section. So the last line is interests. And you want to put kind of like strange, interesting things in there that you're interested in that people would kind of ask you a question about. So I put that I love sci-fi movies, and one of my favorite sci-fi movies is called Primer. Primer is sort of a niche indie movie. It's about time travel, and I was asked at the end of an interview. It was actually my second round interview with Centerview from a VP about that movie. He asked me to explain that movie in 60 seconds. He had seen the movie before, and it really kind of lightened the mood. It really kind of created like a connection between us. And I also kind of got to talk about something that I'm interested in. So other examples, I've had friends that put scuba diving as the last row in their additional section, and they had a full conversation about scuba diving with a VP. And that leads to good conversation. You don't want to guide the conversation into those tangents per se, but if the bankers and the people you're talking to are leading the conversation into those channels and the conversation is positive and flowing, that's a good sign for you. So think about this. As you think about looking at the resume, consider also the amount of time that you're spending when you're in conversations with people. In both of those cases, there's just a limited amount of resources. In an investment banking interview, there's probably like 40 lines, and you need to use those 40 lines very wisely, very judiciously in order to get your point across that you belong there and create conversation in the most succinct way possible. Same thing for a coffee chat or an interview. You have a very limited window of time that you are having a conversation with someone. And so you need to be able to use all of that time as effectively as possible. That's one of the reasons that you should always come in with your tell me about yourself, your why banking, all of these like frequently asked questions, really tight and really ready to deliver as much information as possible in as short of a period of time. And all of that said, the way that I think that one of the things that helps a lot with that is having outside reference. So when you have a upperclassman listen to your story or review your resume, or you have a coach do it, or you have someone who kind of knows what it's supposed to look like, because you won't necessarily know what good looks like. And I have a story that I'll tell later about one of my friends who went to an investment bank and then lateraled to an elite boutique because he changed his resume throughout the summer and recognized kind of what was more relevant. So I'm going to read some of these comments because they're kind of funny. Well, the first one from Leo is more a genuine question. So you mentioned that we shouldn't play with the spacing or the margin. Is there a specific website where we can access the best formatting rules? Yeah, I have a listing up on Offer Goblin for it. There's a resume article. You can download the template. It's a doc. I'm considering releasing a tool that kind of does formatting for people. But also I have my if you send me your resume as well, like I can format it for you and get like also the bullet points and all of that stuff together. So if you want to do it yourself, I would say go there. I think Leland probably has some resources as well. And then if you want someone to look at it with sort of a keen eye, you can send it to me. So far, and keep these coming, please, because they're great. The candidates for what to hang in my room. the Offer Goblin logo, or a framed canvas print of the movie Wall Street. So maybe the sequel. Here's another principle that applies to investment banking resumes. You want to have the stronger arguments first. And that's why it's ordered in that way. So education is on top, experience is in the middle, and additional is on bottom. If you're a lateral and you're pretty far away from school, you can move education down below and lead with experiences. But for the most part, that's the way you're going to want to think about it. And then even within the rows, you're going to want to organize the bullet points for an experience, leading with the most valuable bullet point. And even within that, you want to sort of front load the words that are the most, valuable, that are going to have the most impact, which are usually verbs. That said, you've got 40 lines to work with, and this is the page, and there's a very standard format for it. And so from there, we can go a little bit deeper. Oh, man, I have something in my note about Wall Street Oasis, but right now I'm so frustrated with Wall Street Oasis because everyone attacks my account. I don't know why. All of a sudden, I've become like a pariah at Wall Street Oasis. So if you go on there, you can throw me a banana or whatever they do. But it's kind of a negative cesspool anyway. But all right, so we're going to go a little bit deeper now, right? We talked about the sections. Now let's talk about the lines of a resume. So the education section is just pretty standard. There's not a lot to say there. I think mostly it's saying, I've had this experience. Like for the resume, the one thing that I think, or for the education section, I think the one line that requires any kind of judiciousness is like ordering your club experiences and writing, committee member at whatever the club is and organizing them by what's the most impactful one. But getting into the lines, so the reader is hunting for the thing that actually happened. And here's how, which you need to think about, first of all, which bullets to actually write before you think about how to write them. Really what you want to do is that the bullet points on the resume that most people write are more like describing the job that they did rather than what actually came out of it. So it's important that the bullets that you're choosing are things that things that came into being in some way, or things that actually happened, right? Because you could say I supported due diligence processes, right? Well, it's like, that doesn't really give me anything about, I could look up your job description and that's what I would say. But if you said that I ran due diligence for 6 software deals, 2 of which closed. That is a lot better than saying I supported due diligence, right? Because that actually ties to something that actually happened. The other thing is that as you pick these bullet points and you pick kind of what you want to focus on, it's important to be aware of what's actually relevant to investment banking. And part of the way that you're going to do that naturally is that you're going to go and talk to investment bankers. You're going to go and study investment banking on YouTube, on whatever podcasts or whatever you want to do. And by learning about it, you should be able to better understand what's actually important. And I will tell you what those things are. So here are the most important things to reflect on your resume for investment banking. I would say number 1, which is highly underrated, is client service. So having some experience where you've dealt with clients, you know when to hold your tongue, you know how to deal with an angry client, you know how to make clients happy. That is a great and highly underrated experience. Number 2 is some kind of modeling or analytical experience, working with numbers in some way. For a lot of you, that may not directly be finance, but it could be other things like you may have built Excel models to show operations, or you built it for a supply chain class, or maybe you've done more advanced coding and you could kind of reflect your analytical ability within that. And the third thing is working in a team. So showing that you're able to collaborate with a group and get something done is critically important. Investment banking is a team sport, and a lot of what they're trying to assess for is your behavioral ability to work together with that team. And to do that, you need great teammates. So those 3 things, I think, are underrated things that you need to include in your investment banking resume. Question: what if I don't have strong experience section, but strong finance competitions? Nice. Would you recommend I put it in a different section like awards and achievements above the experience section? I would say still you need to put that down in the additional section. But if it's sort of school related, it could be something that you include in the education section. Otherwise, it should go in the additional section, and it should be essentially a bolded point that says National Finance Champion and then colon and then some details about it. 5X National Champion at XYZ tournament in one line. For some people, if you really are low on experiences, one of the things that you can add is like a leadership and extracurricular section. I don't recommend doing this unless you really, really need to, but that is something that you can add that will kind of allow you to like fit some of those things in if you feel like you really need that. Okay, so I want to tell you a quick story about my friend who I was roommates with over the summer in Menlo Park. So we were both working at investment banks. I was at Centerview, he was at a bulge bracket bank, and he didn't really want to go to that bulge bracket. It was kind of like the offer that he landed. He landed that offer kind of like a week after a lot of other people landed sort of super days. So he was a little kind of like desperate to close that. But what he really wanted was to work at this other elite boutique, which is based in San Francisco. If you know the area, the Bay Area, that's about an hour north of where we were. So one of the things that he did after kind of getting through a little bit of the job, so he worked for about a month, 2 months, it's a 10-week internship. He went back and looked at his resume, and he was kind of shocked because there were so many experiences that he had before, and he worked in engineering before or some form of consulting before, that he did not include there. And the reason he didn't include those things is because he didn't know that they were actually relevant. So for example, he had done a bunch of modeling, but he didn't really know that the type of modeling that he had done in his prior job was so relevant to investment banking. So now that he knew the job a lot better, it was a lot easier for him to then kind of put together a better package to explain how he was a good fit, knowing what his strengths were. So all of that's to point to, it is really important to either have someone who is in banking, who is familiar with finance. It could be an upperclassman, it can be me, it can be whoever, to look at your resume and kind of call those things out for you. I had a mentor who worked in private credit who looked at my resume and said, there's nothing in here about you working with a team. And so I included that. And all of those things add up, right? All of those little details start to add up. So that's something to kind of keep an eye out for, is to try to get outside look at your resume, and also try to learn as much as you can about investment banking so that you know what's going to be most relevant. All right. So here is probably maybe the most important. Okay, here's how to write a good investment banking resume bullet point. There's basically 4 pieces of this. The first one is a strong verb. The second is specific work. The third is the scale or scope of it. And the fourth is the result. So the result is the part that people normally forget, which is that they'll just you need to tie the bullet point to something that a banker or anyone would recognize. So like, it could be anything. It could be money, capital, decision, time. If you take it out, the bullet point basically doesn't mean anything, because it just becomes like, well, you just did this thing, but like, why, it doesn't really make sense why you did it. It doesn't make sense, what the business case of it was. So I'm going to give an example that's a little bit funny here. If you say that you're responsible for supporting the due diligence, process, that sentence could describe a chair or a table that held the paperwork for the diligence process. It tells me that you were basically in the room, but it doesn't tell me that anything actually happened or that you had any part in that. So the same job, you could write it up in this way: ran diligence on 6 software targets and flagged the churn issue that repriced our bid. Repriced a $6 billion bid. That could be the exact same experience, but you can tell in the second one that that's like a much better, more impactful bullet point that would kind of make someone, love you, right? Fall in love with you. And so you really need to kind of structure your things in a way where you tie it to the business case. And a lot of people are not, especially I think younger people. And when I started out working, it was the same. You're probably not completely aware of the business implications of the things that you are doing. I had a mentor when I worked at Deloitte who was very keen on always making sure that I understood those things. He was like, why are we doing this? Do you understand why we're doing this? And we would kind of drill down into that. So you need to kind of think about those things, maybe call the people at your other internship and say like, let's talk. I want to talk through like what we were doing. I remember we did all this. Why did we do that? What was the result of that? And bake those things in. Okay, so here's like some really quick, like rapid fire things about an investment banking resume. First, present tense for the job that you're in now, past tense for everything else, chronological order in terms of the sections or in terms of the experiences, stack the role under one employer. If you were promoted, if you got promoted, you can like split out that like the different role so that you can show like progression. And if one company covered like if you did like several projects, that's another reason that you can like break out the, projects pieces inside of a employer bullet. So here's, every bullet is a hook. You're not describing the job. You're choosing the 4 things that you want to be asked about. And this is basically a home field advantage for you. And a lot of people don't take advantage of it, is that you know the entire universe of what you did, and you get to pick what the interviewers have access to talk to you about, essentially. So pick the ones that you want to be grilled on, that you think you could hold up to scrutiny, and maybe you don't know. A lot of times you put the bullet points and you have to sort of research it, like, yeah, why did we do that? And so you'll need to kind of, pick those judiciously. So so here is a very common question that I get about investment banking resumes. And that is, what numbers should I include? And what if I don't really know the number? So there's kind of like 2 types of numbers that you're going to include. One of them is like, okay, I know that I worked on 2 deals. You just know that's the number that you worked on. It's very clear and obvious to you. You can list that. It's a discrete number. The other number is going to be more like an estimate. And let's say you screened deals all summer. You might say that you screened over 100 deals. Did you really screen 100 deals? Like, are you going to be able to name every single one? Probably not. But you may have some logic, right? You need to have some logic to that. Well, I screened 1 deal a day. It was a 10-week internship, so it was a little over 90 days, so that's how I arrived at 100. That estimation expands into so many other things. I worked in consulting for 4 years. We would estimate so many numbers. We would estimate numbers about the percentage of cost savings of implementing certain tech projects, right? So we would say, well, if you automate this, you'll save 20% operating expenditure. It's like we built that number around estimation. We don't know that that's going to be the case. And guess what? In investment banking, guess which number is constantly estimated? Synergies. No one has any idea what the synergies are going to be or if there will be any real synergies, right? They come up with an educated guess, and that's what you're going to do for the numbers on your resume. They need to be defensible. Don't be stupid about that, and give a range, especially if you're not sure. The best way to give a range is to round it down and put a plus sign. So I worked on 100 plus deals. Don't say 100 to 200, just say 100 plus deals. That's it. The main thing about the number that you include on your resume is that you need to be able to defend it. If you have a logical reason of how you came to that estimate, like, it's fine. People understand that, like, it's not always clear, like, what volume of deals that you worked on or whatever. So it's understood. You just need to be able to defend that. All right. So feel free to throw in any questions if you have any questions, and I will be sure to address them. All right. So Act 3 is the words that you're choosing. And this one I get very passionate about because I think that there are so many derivatives for some reason of word choice. Like it's like this very contrived thing that resumes have to sound and be so weird. There's a whole category of words that I don't think that anyone has ever said outside of a resume. And you should be saying these bullet points like out loud to yourself. And if it doesn't sound like something that like anyone would ever say, then like it's probably not a good bullet point. So the way that you want to think about it is that, and this is from this really great book called Thinking Fast and Slow. The idea is that there's system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 thinking basically is, if I asked you what's your name, you'd be able to recall that and say it without any mental effort. System two thinking is like, what's 33 times 7, right? In order to solve that, you'd have to put some strain into your mind and you'd have to kind of ponder it, right? And when it comes to the resume, an investment banking resume especially, you really don't want to put people into system two thinking. You want very simple words and you want very simple sentences. Everything should be kind of like you can read it, okay, I got it, and you move on. And words are one way that make that overcomplicated. So here are the 6 most hated phrases on an investment banking resume from me. Number 1 is spearheaded. No one has ever said the term spearheaded in real life ever. I've never heard it. And I don't know why, but for some reason people love it on a resume. Just say that you led the thing, say that you built the thing, say whatever it is. You drove it, right? But just don't say spearheaded. Number 2 is utilized or leveraged. Very similar terms that just don't mean anything unless you're talking about like you actually leveraged, debt, right? We work in an industry where there is actually leverage. Use the term leverage to mean that, but don't use it to say that you used something. I leveraged this pen. Don't say that. Another one, meticulous attention to detail. I even think like in general, a lot of adjectives are just really not necessary on a resume, but meticulous is just for whatever reason, it's a very recruitment kind of word. And I don't know why. The next one is streamlined. Streamlined, I can be a little more on the fence about because it's nice. It's a nice term. The letters in it are nice. The sound of it is nice. But I think that it's a little I think there's a simpler way to say what you're trying to say. And I wouldn't say, use the term optimize. I would just avoid those, but trying to, let's say simplify instead of streamline, I simplified a process or I made a process cheaper. I'll say that in a better way, but streamlined is just kind of general. 5, fostered. Another term that I don't know that anyone ever says. You never hear someone say that they fostered something. Only like Foster the People, the 2000s band that wrote Pumped Up Kicks. That's probably the only use case of foster that has ever been acceptable. The last one is pivotal. I don't know why. I don't know why everything is so pivotal. If you pivoted as a startup, I'd say that's probably the one case where you say we pivoted to this. But saying that something is pivotal just seems very grandiose. And I don't think it really helps you. It's also just a weird word, honestly. So I would just not say it. So those are 6 or so words to just avoid. And Raj has 3 of them on his resume. Yeah, they're common. And it's not bad. The other thing is like these words, it's not like this is like gonna crush you. I just advocate heavily that you should be as simple as you can, that it's easy for someone to absorb what you're saying and to get it. And that is really what the craft of writing is about. That is why an author like Hemingway can write in such a minimalistic way and people find it very interesting. Hemingway is a legendary English writer, but he's very, very simple. So that is kind of where you want to run with it. If you have any questions also about your resume, just message me as well. But here's another thing that I think on a resume is kind of weak is when you say that you researched something or that you supported something. Those types of terms that make it seem like you were sort of a passive observer. In terms of those details, like if you think about what you did, right? You researched something, presumably you also put together a memo on it, or you built some kind of material to communicate it and you delivered it to someone. There was some kind of actual action that you took beyond the research that is probably more interesting to show off your communication skills, to show off, I built a model instead of saying like I researched this thing. Those things are a lot more valuable. So yeah, the core thing here, and this is like, honestly, this is for everything. I think investment banking, taught me this, but I think that it's a pretty core skill or language style, which is be simple, direct, and concise. And ideally, you're speaking in basically 8th grade language, because that way you'll keep people in that system 1 thinking. You'll keep them they'll be able to just absorb what you're saying. A lot of them are going, you need to imagine that all of them are sleep deprived and exhausted and they don't want to talk to you, and build everything that you're doing to kind of make it as easy for them to just understand what you're saying. So tear out details that aren't needed. If you're technical, I worked with a candidate who is a computer science major, and I know computer science as well. I studied computer science. I built a technology company. We don't need to know every detail of the database. We don't need to know every, meticulous technical detail of whatever it was that you worked on. We just need to know like the broader thing that you did and the impact that it had. All right. So last thing, and I'm running out of time. So the additional section, I talked a little bit about this already, but this is the section where I think you can generally get conversation going, because when someone actually looks at your resume, what they do is they look at the top and then they go to the bottom and look at the bottom. So if you have something in there that's a little spicy, right? You have I hiked the Appalachian Trail as like your bottom line, or I'm a skydiving instructor or something, right? That's probably going to lead to a conversation. And so that's kind of a good, you don't want to put something that you don't really want to be known for per se, but ideally that's the kind of thing that you are putting there. The other thing I want to say, and I learned this when I was applying to MBA programs, is like, you should like try to level up your hobbies so that you can put them there. Like if you're a runner, it's cooler to say like, oh, qualified for Boston, as opposed to being like, yeah, I run. It's like, well, that's not really like, and I know that that's philosophically not the best thing to do, which is basically just be an achievement, a glutton for achievement. But that's kind of how you're going to survive in this achievement oriented space, right? I'm not in that space now because I have my own business. I don't really care about that as much. But if you are going to be in the rat race, like you need to get some cheese. So go and get some cheese and put it on there. All right. We're nearly out of time. I want to open up for Q&A if anyone has any questions. Leo, would you argue that oversimplifying can take away from the achievement? For example, I built some financial models. Should I include the package names? How to take those details away without keeping the impressive part? When you say package names, are you talking about like plugins to Excel, or like, what do you mean by that? Because the thing is that like, I think what you'd want to focus on is like, well, I built 6, DCF models to show, forecasting for 10 companies and resulting in XYZ. Oh, coding packages. If you're going for investment banking, they're not going to know the coding package. It doesn't even matter. So I think this is actually the most perfect example that you could ask, because that technical detail to you is like interesting and obvious. I know what PyTorch is, but to an investment banker, they're not going to know what that is. You could simplify that way down and just say like, so you built a financial model using Python? That's cool, but usually okay. Yeah. So like so it's not really, you're not going to use PyTorch or R in the job. So it's really not worth it to name drop them. Not only that, but also like the people they're not going to know like what that is. So I would say, and I don't know the context of why you built the model, but you could say like built technical models or built like financial models that you can go different directions, but it's something like, you can either say like it took this many inputs and led to this number of deals, or like that, I built financial models with like auto export function to like lower the amount of time that it took to do something. Like focus less on like what it is and more like what it did as a result of you building it, because they're not gonna, I have tons of cool technical experience. I was doing a master's in computer science at U Chicago, and like, they don't know they don't care. They don't know what it is. So they do. Okay. So like Black-Scholes, Monte Carlo. I think anyone in finance would probably be familiar with that, but investment banking, specifically M&A and that sort of thing, like you're not using a ton of that. I also think like, if you just think about it, you have a certain number of letters to use. And like, do you want to state Black-Scholes and Monte Carlo, or do you want to say using multiple, statistical methods or something, right? Like if you can say it in fewer words and still capture the idea that this guy's analytical, he knows multiple statistical methods, as opposed to like name dropping like Monte Carlo, That's like kind of better, I would say. And I'll plug this again that if you send me your resume, I have like an asynchronous thing that you can like send to me and I'll send it back to you within like a day or so. And then we can do like a few like turns on that where we like kind of message back and forth and I kind of like tidy it up for you. So if you're not sure in your resume, feel free to do that. I think that it's kind of comforting to just have it set and done. And the earlier that you do that, I mean, you have a whole process in front of you, is like, would just be great, just so that you're not like, it's just not a concern, not a point of concern. Any other questions? I'm gonna like slowly. Okay, yeah. The other thing I'll plug is to register for the series. There's like, I don't know how many, 6, I guess, of these. This is the first of 6. And they're all oriented on things that you want to know before you get into the coffee chat. So that is where you should go. Check out offergoblin.com. We also have a resume template there. I think Leland probably posts one as well. And yeah, feel free to message me. Doing the next one is on Thursday. It is on Coffee Chat Outreach. So that's another like key thing. But other than that, thank you all for showing up. It means a ton. Keep coming to these. We're going to get through this together and I'll see you on Thursday.